Hi everyone, I'm Shelley and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. Well, there have been so many things going on in our school system, and I have really been trying to avoid them because I feel like I make too many videos complaining about a school system that my kids aren't even a part of. But the fact remains that even though my own kids are not in this school system, the majority of kids are, and those kids are our future. And so, what these kids are being exposed to while they are in school will eventually affect me, will eventually affect my children, and Lord willing, if I ever have any, my grandchildren someday. So, I think it's really about time that I just bring up some of the stuff that's been happening because it honestly feels like there is one scandal after another happening in our schools. And so I just thought that I would bring some of them to your attention. You may have heard of them, you may have not, and I'm certainly not going to go over all of them because we could be here all night. And I'm not going to read through every single article in detail, but again, it's important that whether you have kids in these schools or not, that you know what's going on. So the first one I'm going to go over with you is this happened in California. Entire school board resigns after members get caught mocking parents. So there is a video here. I'm not going to play the video because there is some profanity on it as the school board members are talking about parents. Apparently, they had thought that the meeting was closed, so they were bashing parents who wanted the schools to reopen. They were saying that the parents just wanted babysitters and that they wanted to be able to stay home and smoke pot and all of these other things. And it turned out that the meeting was open. And so, of course, there was a huge backlash over this, and this school board ended up resigning. So we'll just quick read here. Members of a California school board resigned en masse after they were caught mocking parents during a public video meeting about reopening schools shuttered during the pandemic. And then down here it says, the board members were caught on video complaining about parents who wanted teachers to return to their classrooms. Brizendine, I don't know how to say that, appeared to mock parents who want their babysitters back during the Wednesday meeting, which trustees thought was private. The comments made were not in alignment with our vision and are definitely not what any of us stand for as leaders and all blah, 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 all of that. So, and the thing is that I talk about this stuff all the time about how a lot of teachers actually do view parents. Not all teachers, there are some genuinely good teachers out there, but a lot of teachers really do have a condescending look at parents. And even though these are school board members and not actual teachers, I think that it really does give us a good view of what a lot of parents are facing when their kids are back in school. This is why I always say that when my kids were in school, I felt like a secondary parent. I felt like I was answering to everyone else. And this is primarily one of those reasons. I always did kind of feel like they were looking down on me. So another story is outrage after New Jersey school official shames parent for sledding without masks. Yeah, so this was a New Jersey school official. Let's just see what this was about quick. A New Jersey school district official shamed a parent with pictures of her family sledding without masks after she complained about the continuation of remote learning. The outspoken mom had repeatedly criticized her local district for their inability to deliver on a pledge to resume any classroom activity after the holidays. The assistant superintendent of schools then responded to one of her complaints by sending back pictures from the mom's social media accounts. So he was actually like trolling her account, looking for goods to deliver on her, that showed her family and others frolicking in the snow with no face coverings. The administrator argued that the facial nudity was the precise reason our school community remains in phase 1, according to the site. For instance, we know that parents and students are not following the same CDC guidelines that you continue to share with us that detail the importance of social distancing and mask wearing, he wrote. So we have this school official here. He didn't like that this mother was being outspoken about the school's reopening, so he went and he kind of stalked her social media pages, and he found a photo of her sledding with her children and with some friends, and he actually used that to shame her and to kind of blame people like her for being the reason that, they're still in phase 1. So that is yet another story we have going on in our school system right now. So we're on to the next one. Virginia school district to allow students a day off to protest. So, yeah. So now, apparently, now, and this is funny because if you have been on my channel before, you may remember that a while back, I made this video right here called Public Education, Brainwashing the Next Generation of Change Agents. And what I talked about in this video was how school is no longer about academics, and I say that all the time, but how they were basically trying to just bring up their next generation of youth activists. And I think that the fact that these schools are willing to give kids off a day to protest, well, that kind of confirms what I was talking about. So let's just read a little bit of what it says here. One of the largest school districts in the United States has announced that it will allow students one excused absence per school year to participate in civic activities such as protests. When I was a kid, if I would have skipped school or stayed home from school to go to a protest, I would have gotten an unexcused absence. Or actually, in my day, they called them illegal absences. And now they actually want to give these kids the day off so that they can go protest. Why? Because school is no longer about academics. It is about social engineering. And activism, as long as you are being an activist in a way that the school system approves of, they're totally fine with you taking off. So what it says here, we're just going to skip down here. I think we're setting the stage for the rest of the nation with this, McElveen said. It's a dawning of a new day in student activism, and school systems everywhere are going to have to be responsive to it. And let's just see what else it says. But some experts told the Post that skipping school to attend protests tends to favor liberal causes. Kids on the right who are active, they tend to be doing it by preparing to run for school board or being aides in legislature, said Myra Levinson. People who call themselves conservatives probably do still count respecting authority, staying in school, as a crucial and central tenet of the social order. So, yeah, I'm trying to find, I saw this really good quote down here. Skipping school and business as usual is to show that there's no point in going to school if we are having our future taken away from us, she said. There's not a point to our education if we're not going to be alive in 10 years, 20 years, the end of the century. And the fact that they actually think this, I mean, that I can't help but think of a lot of the activism that was happening with the climate and everything. Some of these kids are scared to death, and a lot of these kids are hearing these things at school. So yeah, so now this school district is going to start giving kids a day off every year so that they can go protest, because that's academics, I suppose. All right, so the next one. Now these are going to get a little bit I try to avoid stuff like this. I really do, because as controversial as my videos are, I don't like to touch on stuff like this because people are very, very sensitive about this. And this is something, though, that we can't ignore it anymore. So I'm going to have to just approach it right now. New York City Public School asks parents to reflect on their whiteness. So what is going on is that we have a lot of the critical race theory going through the school system. A lot of the school systems are starting to use the BLM curriculum, and racism is a bad thing, and I'm not going to deny that 100%. But I also happen to believe that racism against any race is a bad thing. And unfortunately, what is happening is that the critical race theory is kind of targeting these white children and their families in the schools. So this principal, he sent home, I think it was through an email, I'm not sure, but he told them to reflect on their whiteness. And this was one of the charts with the 8 white identities that he wanted them to think about. So let's just read through this. A city public school principal is asking parents to reflect on their whiteness, passing out literature that extols white traitors who dismantle institutions. The woke offensive at the East Side Community School in Manhattan features a ranking list titled The 8 White Identities, which ranges from white supremacist to white abolitionist. And it shows it down here better, but let's just read through this quickly. So the curriculum, and it's written by Barner Hess, an associate professor of African American Studies at Northwestern University, claims there is a regime of whiteness and there are action-oriented white identities. People who identify with whiteness are one of these. And he writes that Hess writes above the 8-point list. It's about time we build an ethnography of whiteness, since white people have been the ones writing about and governing others. And so what you will notice in this chart, so here we have, so the red is like the really bad ones, and coming down here to the green is like the good ones. But if you even look at the good ones, there's always some negative aspects of it, just because of there's any sort of whiteness at all. So we've got white supremacist, white voyeurism, white privilege, white benefit, white confessional, white critical, white traitor, white abolitionist. And, here's what I think about this whole thing. Not my personal opinion on this, but just the fact that schools are sending stuff like this home to parents and with children and are exposing children to this at school. First of all, I believe that stuff like this is actually creating more division. I have never seen as much racial division in my life as I have recently. And what I've noticed is that a lot of it is coming about because of these sorts of things. A lot of kids, especially a lot of white kids, they feel like they're on the defensive. And I don't know, like I as someone who is white, I can't say what the experience is that other people had who are not white. But what I can say is that if the tables were turned and if a principal ever sent, we'll just say, Black parents or Hispanic parents, something about their identities, and was in essence telling them that they were bad because of how they were born, something that they had no control over, I think that there will be an outcry. And unfortunately, there's not much of an outcry over this, not like you would think that there would be. And again, it's because it's something that is really prevalent in schools nowadays. So we'll just start reading here again. It says, in between the two extreme identities of supremacists and abolitionists are such categories as white voyeurism, defined as wouldn't challenge a white supremacist, desires non-whiteness because it's interesting, and white privilege, or sympathetic to a set of issues but only privately, won't speak or act in solidarity publicly because benefiting through whiteness in public. Some POC are in this category as well. Whatever happened to schools being about academics? That is my whole thing. Really, when it comes to you and your family, what you believe about critical race theory, what you believe about the 8 white identities, any of this, like, honestly, that should be between you and your children. You should not have a school sending stuff home like this. The schools, when they were originally formed, were supposedly, now we know what the truth is about what schools were all about. We know. But what they originally told parents was that they were going to open these schools up so that children could be literate. It was about literacy, even though literacy went down once these compulsory schools opened. But that's another video entirely. But that's what it was about. It was supposedly about literacy. And then they started saying that it was just about education in general, just about, teaching children history and science and math. And I don't think that anybody had an issue with that. But what has happened is that it has now morphed, and they have gone from teaching these objective academics to pushing a value system on the students. And values are very, very hard to be objective about. They are very subjective. There are going to be some parents who completely agree with this. There are going to be other parents who totally disagree with this. And this is something that should not be taught in school. This should be a no-no for stuff like this to be sent home. And I'll leave links to in the description for all of these articles if you wanted to check them out on your own. But I just wanted to touch on that. Here's another one. 5th graders forced to celebrate Black communism hold mock Black Power rally and honor Angela Davis. 5th graders in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania were subjected to a celebration of Black communism, complete with a mock Black Power rally to honor devout communist Angela Davis. Christopher Rufo, contributing editor at City Journal, reported on the classroom activities after receiving whistleblower documents and speaking to a school source. Students at William D. Kelly School were forced to participate in a social studies curriculum that celebrated Davis. praising the Black communist for her fight against injustice and inequality. Students were required to describe Davis's early life, reflect on her vision of social change, and define communist, presumably in favorable terms, Rufo reported. So this is, now they're teaching communism now, and they're celebrating it. At the conclusion of the unit, the teacher led the 10 and 11-year-old students into the school auditorium to simulate a Black Power rally to free Angela Davis from prison, where she had once been held while awaiting trial on charges of conspiracy, kidnapping, and murder. The students marched the stage holding signs that read Black Power, Jail Trump, Free Angela, and Black Power Matters. They chanted about Africa and ancestral power, then shouted Free Angela, as they stood at the front of the stage. Davis is a militant activist praised by the left. She joined the Communist Party and has won the International Lenin Peace Prize, an award from the Soviet Union named after Vladimir Lenin. She has also been accused of anti-Semitism over her support for Occupy Wall Street and the boycott, divestment, and sanctions campaign. So, communism being celebrated in the schools. What a surprise. All right, let's go to this one next. Parents angry over survey that asks middle school students about their sexual orientation. And it says, Sumner County Schools, this should not have been shared with students. And so apparently what they did was they sent something home asking, I think, middle schoolers about their sexual orientation. So it says Hammersley took a picture of the controversial question sent to select students on Monday. What is your sexual orientation? And then it gives all of these choices. And it says, Hammersley says the question is inappropriate for students like her 12-year-old daughter. She comes to me and she's like, Mama, which one am I? And I immediately called the school. And the mom makes a very good point here. She says, for one, it's none of the school's business what my child is. And thank you, for sure. That's not in any way an educational purpose. Yes, and that is my point. None of the things that I am talking about have anything to do with education, but everything to do with shaping society. These kids are the future. And this is why, I posted a tweet. I took a picture of it, or I screenshotted a tweet that I had the other day, and I put it on Instagram, and people were so angry at me because of the things that I was saying about school. And they were telling me that I shouldn't be so divisive. And if my kids are being homeschooled, none of this should matter to me. But this is why it matters, because a majority of these kids are dealing with stuff like this. They are the ones who are going to be in control in the future. What kind of a future are we going to have if they are being engineered in this way? So yes, it is completely my business to talk about these things. And anyway, then she said, secondly, my child is 12. She's not exposed to this. And that's for sure. So next we have a lot of these schools. Now I talked about how they were, introducing like the critical race theory in schools and the BLM curriculum. So I just wanted to go, this is on the website for the BLM curriculum. And I wanted to go over some of their guiding principles. And again, if these principles are things that you as a parent agree with or disagree with, that is something, these values are things that should be taught by parents, not by teachers. It is not the school system's job to be putting subjective, very biased material forward like this. They say that they're supposed to be about academics and educating children, then educate them. Stop spending time on doing things that parents should be doing. Stay in your lane, schools. That's what you really need to do. But instead, what they're doing is they are introducing curriculum that has, this is not about academics. So their main principles, and the principles, if you look at them, they don't, I don't disagree with all of them. But, again, this is not academics. This does not belong in our school system. So the first one is restorative justice, empathy, loving engagement. And that, okay, fine. But again, this is not academics. Diversity, globalism. And I really start to have a problem with globalism, because that's where a lot of the very political stuff starts seeping in. Again, let parents teach values to their kids. Queer affirming, trans affirming, collective values. So here we've got collectivism, very political, very socialist, something that not all parents agree with. Intergenerational, and I'm all for intergenerational things, but again, we need to stick to the academics and let parents raise their children in the way that they want them to be raised. Black families, Black villages, and actually here is where I really wanted to focus, because you know me, you know how big I am on the family and how important I think it is for, just society in general, for the stability. We need the strong foundation of family. And what really bothers me about this is that it says we are committed to disrupting the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other as extended families and villages. And yes, we should support each other, but we do not need to disrupt the nuclear family. And again, that's my opinion seeping in, and which is why schools should not be teaching this. Let's see. Unapologetically Black. No one should apologize for who they are. So that, again, this isn't something that I think that I disagree with everything, but it's not something that belongs in a school. And Black women, and then it says we are committed to building a Black women affirming space free from sexism, misogyny, and male-centeredness. And see, right there, that is assuming that you agree that this is an issue. For example, I don't agree that that's an issue, and I would not want my children learning that. When I was actually looking through, maybe through the resources, I don't remember where it was that I saw it. But what they're doing is they are teaching these children that they are teaching these children with this curriculum, and they're making a lot of assumptions, and they are all very left-wing assumptions that, again, parents, if they had any idea that their kids were learning this stuff, they wouldn't be happy with it at all. I think another thing that it talked about is how they were, kind of like that whole the patriarchy is bad thing, and I talked about this. I actually think it was for a Patreon video recently, but I talked about, the role of the father and how it's being downplayed. And so eventually, yeah, I will publish that publicly in a few months, but right now it's just for my Patreon patrons. But this whole patriarchy thing too, they're also pushing this on students. And again, a lot of assumptions are being made here that the parents would be okay with that. And I know that the people making this curriculum and the people teaching this curriculum, they honestly don't care if parents agree with it. To them, it's like, well, so what? This is what's right, and these kids need to hear this. But that's the problem. It's what they think is right. There are certain areas of life that, yes, they are black and white. But when it comes to values, yeah, I have to say that to me, there are definitely black and white values. Like I'm one of those very black and white thinkers. However, I also understand that there are families who think differently than I do. And so again, this is why this whole values-based education, it needs to go. All right. Sorry, my throat's like getting a little scratchy here. Next we have William Shakespeare is ditched by woke teachers over misogyny and racism. So William Shakespeare is not going to be taught in some schools anymore because they say, again, that he's a misogynist and racist. Totally taking it out of context, I believe. But an increasing number of woke teachers are refusing to study the Bard, accusing his classic works of promoting misogyny, racism, homophobia, classism, anti-Semitism, and I've never seen that word in my life. Misogynoir? I have no idea. That's a new one for me. So anyway, so they're taking Shakespeare out of the schools. I saw another one. It was, I believe, Homer's Odyssey. I believe that they said they weren't going to be teaching in some schools anymore. And then we have Dr. Seuss. Now, I know here that this was actually from 2019, but I found it relevant because I came across a post on Instagram today, a teacher's account, and she is like well over 100,000 followers. And she's just telling everyone, don't read Dr. Seuss to your students. Dr. Seuss was a racist. And then she posted some cartoons that he had originally created. And there's no denying the fact that some of the things that were in these cartoons by Dr. Seuss are not things that you want to see. You know, he used a lot of language that, yes, was troubling. Unfortunately, though, when he made these cartoons, this was the attitude. This was considered the norm when he was making these cartoons. And from what I've read, he actually changed as time went on. But they're telling you, don't read your students Dr. Seuss because he was a total racist. And they're also saying, don't read Shakespeare to your students because Shakespeare was a misogynist and a racist. But the thing that gets me is that these very teachers who are telling you, who are basically trying to now cancel this literature, they're the very same people who will be going to these marches that support, we'll say, Planned Parenthood, who was founded by Margaret Sanger, who was probably one of the most racist people I've ever heard of. Not only a racist, she was a eugenicist. She said a lot of brutal things about the Black community. So that's why I'm just not seeing what the difference that they're targeting Dr. Seuss and Shakespeare, yet they're in support of a woman who openly wanted to exterminate the Black community. So a lot of the things that we're seeing, they're just very disingenuous, and it's all about pushing. It's about pushing an agenda. And they will kind of pick and choose the things that fit their agenda, and they'll just pretend that those things that don't fit their agenda, like they don't even exist. Like they're going to just pretend that Margaret Sanger is not a racist, even though, you know, she was. Yeah, definitely. And these are the things that kids are learning in school nowadays. So I'm going to say it again. If you get upset because I talk about schools and all the stuff that's going on in them, and say, well, it doesn't affect you, your kids aren't in school, it will affect my kids, because whoever controls the schools rules the world. So if I'm going to have to leave the future of my kids, the future of my hopefully one day grandkids, to people who are learning stuff like this, it's not something I even want to think about. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram or on my YouTube community tab. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.